Good morning, you're watching Daybreak live on A News and I'm your host Nadia Jani, taking you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. Trump vents his frustration with allies over the Strait of Hormuz. Afghanistan accuses Pakistan of killing hundreds in hospital strike. And Trump says he is honored to take Cuba, who has been hit by island-wide blackout as energy crisis deepens. First this morning, US President Donald Trump has expressed frustration with countries declining to send warships to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He said he was unhappy with the responses from the UK, who turned down the request. This comes as the conflict in the Middle East enters its third week.
As the conflict in the Middle East enters its 17th day, US President Donald Trump has signalled frustration over the reluctance of allies to support US military efforts, particularly in securing the Strait of Hormuz. Trump earlier called on nations to help safeguard the strait after Iran responded to US-Israeli attacks by using drones, missiles and mines, effectively closing the channel to tankers that normally transport a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer refrained from sending warships to the strait, with authorities saying they were considering only the option of deploying drones to search for mines.
Prime Minister of UK, United Kingdom, yesterday told me, I'm meeting with my team to make a determination. I said, you don't need to meet it with the team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make your own. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us or to send some boats?
Meanwhile, strikes across the Middle East have continued, with Iraqi security officials reporting drones and rockets attacking the US embassy in Baghdad in what they describe as the most intense assault since the attacks began. Baghdad's Al Rashid Hotel was also struck on Monday, causing damage but no casualties, though no group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Across Israel, interception explosions were seen in the night sky over Tel Aviv. It comes as the Israeli military says it is advancing operations against Iran, with reports of strikes on Iran's Navy headquarters.
Our pilots attack across Iran all of the time. In the 24 hours, we hit the Revolutionary Guard's Navy headquarters. The Iranian regime used this headquarters to turn the naval arena into a terror arena. In another attack in the heart of Tehran, we hit and destroyed a satellites attack capabilities development center, a center that posed a threat to Israel's and the whole world's space assets and satellites. At the same time, we continue to attack the Basij forces, the Iranian oppression forces.
As the conflict in the Middle East continues, prospects for de-escalation appear limited, with neither the US and Israeli side nor the Iranian side signalling a push towards a ceasefire agreement.
Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to the Guardian website, who has been doing a live open page about what's been happening across this morning and into the early hours of yesterday evening. So a couple of things which you would have already heard in the report just given, but there was a wave of drone and rocket attacks on the US embassy in Baghdad in the early morning of Tuesday, and that's what Iraqi security forces have confirmed. Also air traffic operations. So the UAE has now reopened its airspace after an Iran attack, so now that area is now open and planes are able to fly through. And there's a number of other things happening. Also, we know that the Strait of Hormuz has been a major issue in relation to what Trump has been requesting for a number of NATO countries to step in regards to keeping the airspace open. Now let's go to our next website, which is on Politico, and that's in relation to Hormuz and what he's been calling for. So the response from a lot of EU countries is, don't blackmail us. Europe rejects Trump's demand to help clean up Hormuz's mess. So just to give you an update, Trump asked yesterday for a number of warships to head out, but foreign ministers from 27 EU countries gathered in Brussels on Monday to discuss Trump's request after hours of closed-door negotiations and talks about the war in Iran. Europe's foreign envoys made clear that they see this as America's problem and to solve, and not necessarily theirs. On Monday evening, the EU diplomat Kaja Kallas said that Europe has no interest in an open-ended war. There's been a few quotes coming in as well. One from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who said NATO is a defensive alliance, not an interventionist one. And that is precisely why NATO has no place here at all, is what he said. So quite strong words from him. Also, Luxembourg's Deputy Prime Minister Xavier Bettel said, don't ask us to send troops, was his remarks. And British Prime Minister has insisted that the UK will not be drawn into the wider war in the Middle East. Now, Trump said in a press conference he wasn't happy with the UK's response, but has said that France was willing to provide a help in hand, and repeated the call for other countries to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which, because it's not been open, and obviously Iran is very much attacking any ships that pass through there, oil prices have surged due to that, and it's something that Trump is trying to get a handle on. Okay, now let's go to our next story, and that's on Al Jazeera's website, and that's in regards to what's happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So Afghanistan has accused Pakistan of killing 400 in attack on Kabul hospital. So this is the latest that we've received, information that we received from them, saying that Afghanistan says that Pakistan's military has launched strikes on the hospital which killed at least 400 people and injured hundreds. Pakistan has actually dismissed those claims as false, is what it said, and aimed at misleading public opinion. It said it only targeted military installations in Kabul and the province of Nangarhar on Monday. Now, the attack on Kabul's Omar Addiction Treatment Hospital took place at about 9 p.m. local time, and local television stations actually reported footage showing firefighters struggling to extinguish flames among the ruins of the building. Now, the attack comes hours after Afghan officials said the two sides had exchanged fire along the common border. Now, we do also know this is the deadliest fighting between the two neighbours in years, and it's now entered into its third week. So we'll be keeping a close eye on this and exactly what else is to come. Now we move over to our next story headlining today, and that's on New York Times in reference to Cuba. The headline is, Trump says he will have the honour of taking Cuba. Now, US President Trump in a press conference at the White House yesterday said, taking Cuba, I mean whether I free it, take it, I think I can do anything I want, is the remarks that he said. Anything I want with it, he said. They're a very weakened nation right now. So his words come on the same day as Cuba experienced a nationwide blackout on Monday evening. Now, Cuban officials had also planned to announce that the country's communist government would be open itself to foreign investment. However, it's unclear how widely Cuba intends to open its economy, but some experts say that the island could run out of fuel within weeks. Now, this has happened because for the past 3 months, the US has choked off Cuba's access to foreign oil, blocking shipments from Venezuela and elsewhere. It's also put pressure on a number of other Latin American countries not to provide Cuba with the necessary things that it needs, especially oil. Now, and because of that, hospitals have had to postpone some procedures, and there's been food shortages as well, which has led to a very rare protest on the island. Now, the New York Times also reported that Trump administration is said to be seeking to push President Miguel Diaz-Canel from power, which is what he actually wants, and may or may not keep the regime in place, but might just change its leadership. But we'll keep you up to date in reference to everything that is going on. We now move over to the fourth headline for the day, and that's on the BBC, and that's in reference to what I spoke about yesterday in Kenya. So Russia agreed to stop using Kenyan recruits in Ukraine conflict, Kenya said. says. So yesterday, Kenya's foreign minister went to Russia for a meeting because there were talks to say that there were a number of soldiers were heading over to Russia under a false narrative. They thought they was going there for civilian jobs, but they were actually going there to fight the war for Russia against Ukraine. So Russia has now agreed to stop recruiting Kenyan citizens to fight with its army in Ukraine. Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov insisted that all foreign fighters had joined voluntarily in full compliance with Russian law, but some Kenyans have said they were lured into fighting for Russia with promises of well-paid civilian jobs, only to find out that this was not the case. Now, a Kenyan intelligence report in February warned that more than 1,000 citizens had been recruited to fight for Russia in Ukraine, but it's not clear how many Kenyans had died fighting for Russian forces, and Russia has not formally addressed such reports. Now, Ukrainian intelligence assessment estimates that roughly more than 1,700 people from 36 countries in Africa have been recruited to fight for Russia. But it is good news for Kenyans and their families after they have been trying the government to find out, and also the embassy in Nairobi to find out exactly where their loved ones have gone and to bring them back, because they have been missing and went to Russia and they have not heard from them. So if anything, this is a good move, and hopefully will continue to stop recruiting Kenyan soldiers or Kenyan military under a false guise. Okay, well, that's all the headlines currently at the moment. That's the press roundup. Now I'm going to take a short break, and when I return, I'll discuss the rest of the global stories for the morning. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories for the morning. Israel's military says its troops have begun limited and targeted ground operations against the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Several Western countries have warned that a wider offensive could worsen the humanitarian crisis and prolong the conflict. Here's more.
Canada, France, Germany, Italy and Britain have warned that a major Israeli ground offensive in Lebanon must be averted, saying it could have devastating humanitarian consequences and risk a protracted conflict. The statement also expressed support for Lebanese efforts to disarm Hezbollah and called for urgent engagement between Israeli and Lebanese representatives to negotiate a sustainable political solution. The move came after the Israeli military said on Monday that its troops had begun limited ground operations against Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon in recent days, aimed at strengthening forward defences. Meanwhile, smoke rose over southern Beirut on Tuesday as Israeli strikes hit multiple areas, with flashes of explosions lighting up the night sky. A statement from the Israeli military said the troops had located and dismantled a Hezbollah weapons cache. The area was reportedly evacuated and weapons and materials used for incitement were seized. Tensions have also spilled across the border. Emergency services in northern Israel reported 3 people injured when a projectile fired from Lebanon struck a building, sparking a fire. Lebanon was drawn deeper into the Middle East conflict on March 2nd after the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel, claiming retaliation for the killing of Iran's supreme leader at the start of the US-Israel war with Iran. Lebanese authorities report more than 880 people have been killed, over 1 million displaced, and more than 130,000 now living in collective shelters. Israel has maintained positions in southern Lebanon since a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November 2024. But the latest escalation has raised fears the conflict could spiral into a wider regional war.
The International Energy Agency could release additional emergency oil stocks if market disruptions continue, according to the agency's executive director, Faith Birol. The agency has already coordinated the largest oil reserve release in its history, recommending that member countries supply about 400 million barrels to global markets. The planned move is intended to ease price pressure due to disruptions linked to the conflict in the Middle East and shipping risks around the Strait of Hormuz. Birol says the release will only reduce emergency reserves by a limited share.
Despite this huge release, we still have a lot of stocks left. This current stock release once it is completed, will reduce the emergency stocks in AIA countries only by around 20%. In terms of government stocks and industry stocks held under government obligation, if you combine them, there will be still over 1.4 billion barrels remaining, which means we can do more later as and if needed.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has returned to court in Paris to challenge a conviction linked to alleged campaign funding from Muammar Gaddafi's Libya for his 2007 election, which he denies.
Nicolas Sarkozy, the former president of France, appeared before the Paris Court of Appeal as a retrial began over allegations that his 2007 election campaign received illegal funding linked to the regime of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The 71-year-old was sentenced last year to 5 years in prison after being convicted of criminal conspiracy linked to contacts between his associates and Libyan officials between 2005 and 2007. The decision marked a historic moment, making Sarkozy the first post-war French president to serve time in prison. He began serving the sentence in October at La Santé prison in Paris, but was released after about 3 weeks under judicial supervision while awaiting appeal. The conditions of his release include a ban on leaving France. During the original trial, prosecutors said Sarkozy's associates sought financial support from Libya for his successful 2007 presidential campaign, allegedly in exchange for diplomatic and political backing for the Libyan government. Sarkozy has consistently denied the accusations. The appeal proceedings review 4 charges: criminal conspiracy, corruption, misuse of Libyan public funds, and illegal campaign financing. Prosecutors are also challenging earlier acquittals on some of those counts. If convicted in the retrial, Sarkozy could face up to 10 years in prison.
Tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan continue to rise after an airstrike hit a rehabilitation hospital in the Afghan capital of Kabul, killing around 400 people. The Taliban government has accused Pakistan of carrying out the attack, a claim Islamabad strongly denies.
Dozens of people are feared dead or injured after an airstrike hit a drug treatment centre in Kabul, Afghanistan on Tuesday. Officials from the Taliban government say the attack was carried out by Pakistan. The strike reportedly targeted the Omid Addiction Treatment Hospital, a 2,000-bed facility that provides treatment for people struggling with drug addiction. Pakistan has rejected the accusation, describing it as false and misleading. Officials say their forces carried out precision strikes on Monday night, targeting what they called military installations and terrorist support infrastructure. They insist that the operations were directed only at military sites in Kabul and in the eastern Afghan province of Nangarhar. However, Afghan health officials say there are no military facilities located near the hospital. Rescue teams were deployed to the scene to control fires and search through the damaged buildings for victims. The strike came hours after officials reported exchanges of fire along the shared border between the two countries. 4 people were also reported killed in separate cross-border clashes, as the deadliest fighting between Afghanistan and Pakistan in years enters its 3rd week. Tensions between the neighbouring countries reignited last month after Pakistan accused Afghanistan of harbouring militant groups, an allegation the Taliban government denies.
US President Donald Trump has made remarks about Cuba during comments at the White House, saying he believes he could have the honour of taking the island nation, which he described as currently weakened. Here's more on that report.
So
It could be that we delay it a little bit. I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders.
Staying on Cuba, the island has been hit by a nationwide blackout on Monday, impacting 11 million people as its energy and economic crisis deepen and its power grid continues to crumble. Here's more.
Cuba's national electricity grid has collapsed, leaving around 10 million people without power across the island as authorities work to restore electricity. The country's grid operator, Union Electrica, said it is investigating the cause of the outage. Officials ruled out a major power plant failure, but indicated the blackout may have been triggered by a problem in the transmission system. Engineers have begun restoring electricity to small clusters of circuits, known as microsystems, an early step toward reconnecting the national grid. The blackout is the latest in a series of outages affecting the country, where residents have become accustomed to frequent power cuts lasting hours or even days.
The news didn't surprise me. We're already used to living with this. I think we need to become less dependent on what happens at the national level and focus more on our own individual problems. If the national electric power system goes down, people have to find ways to prepare themselves however they can, with wood-burning stoves, with solar panels for those who can get them, with water reserves for those who face shortages, and with gas reserves for those who have access to them, which is actually an even more complicated issue than the power grid.
Cuba's electricity system has struggled in recent years because of aging infrastructure and fuel shortages, which have repeatedly caused major disruptions. The crisis has also intensified political tensions. The United States has increased pressure on Havana this year, including measures aimed at limiting oil shipments to the island, further straining its already fragile energy system.
Washington is sharpening its military focus as strategic competition with China intensifies. A new US defense strategy is setting clearer priorities and placing tougher expectations on partners across the Indo-Pacific. Here's what the shift could mean for the regional security.
The United States has unveiled its 2026 National Defense Strategy, and analysts say it marks a major shift in how Washington plans to use its military power. Unlike previous strategies, this one is not just a policy update. Experts say it represents the outcome of a long debate about America's global role and its military limits. An article published in Foreign Policy states that at the center of the strategy is one clear priority: China. Washington now calls China the main challenge shaping US defense planning. Russia is described as a continuing but secondary threat, while North Korea and Iran remain regional concerns. The strategy focuses on four main goals: defending the US homeland, deterring China in the Indo-Pacific, increasing defense contributions from allies, and rebuilding America's defense industry. Much of the thinking behind the plan comes from Elbridge Colby, the US Undersecretary of Defense for Policy and a key architect of modern US defense thinking. Colby helped shape the 2018 National Defense Strategy and later outlined his ideas in the book The Strategy of Denial. His core argument is simple: the United States does not need to dominate every region of the world, but it must stop any rival, especially China, from controlling Asia. The strategy therefore puts the Indo-Pacific at the center of US military planning. A key focus is the so-called First Island Chain, a line of islands stretching along East Asia that analysts see as crucial for limiting China's military expansion. This approach also changes expectations for US allies. Countries located near this strategic line, such as South Korea and the Philippines, are expected to strengthen their own defenses and play a more active role in regional security. The strategy keeps some flexibility in other areas. Southeast Asian states and partners like India may still maintain economic ties with China, but security choices that weaken the regional balance will face stronger pressure from Washington. Analysts say this new doctrine brings greater clarity to US strategy, but it also carries risks. Allies that are used to flexibility may resist stricter expectations, especially if greater military spending or political commitments are required. In short, The United States is making a clear strategic bet: concentrate power in Asia, rely more on partners, and prevent China from dominating the region. Whether that strategy succeeds may depend not only on China, but also on how America's allies respond.
And whether that strategy is something the United States President Donald Trump wants to discuss with China is still to be confirmed, as he is now seeking to delay a highly anticipated trip to China in early April by about a month because of the US-Israeli war on Iran. He told reporters in the Oval Office that the US looks forward to working with them and said the two sides have a very good relationship.
We're working on that right now. We're speaking to China. I'd love to. But because of the war, I want to be here. I have to be here, I feel. And so we've requested that we delay it a month or so. And I'm looking forward to being with them. We have a very good relationship, but because of the war, there's no tricks to it either. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm waiting. It's very simple. We got a war going on. I think it's important that I be here. You know? So it could be that we delay it a little bit.
Now, the two countries held an economic and trade talks in Paris to discuss tariffs, trade, cooperation and investment. Chinese Vice Premier He Lingfang met with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and US Trade Representative Jameson Greer, with both sides agreeing to continue consultations. China reiterated its opposition to US tariffs and called for their removal, while officials said discussions also focused on maintaining stable tariff levels. Now, turning to West Africa, a multiple blast rocked northeastern Nigeria's Borno state on Monday, killing and injuring scores of people in the Maiduguri city, the Borno state capital, security sources and residents said. The first blast went off at a post office in the city centre and was immediately followed by another at the popular Monday market nearby. The sources and residents said two more blasts hit the University of Maiduguri teaching hospital and another struck the eastern neighbourhood of Kalere, all on the early evening of Monday. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the suspected bombings. Now over to a very quick break, and when I return I'll be joined by a guest to look at the regional headlines and to dig further into some of the key stories. Stay with me. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now we turn to the region, and as tensions in the wider Middle Eastern theatre involving Iran and its principal adversaries continue to unfold, with some ambiguous messaging emerging from the current administration in Washington, the regional implications of the crisis remain as relevant as they were at the beginning of its latest phase of confrontation. Joining me now to discuss this is Chingiz Mammadov, research alumni at NED and Woodrow Wilson International Centre for Scholars. Welcome this morning.
Thanks for inviting me, and Nadia, and if you allow me, I would congratulate our viewers with the last so-called Tuesday before Nowruz. It's an important day, last Tuesday before Nowruz. So congratulations to all our viewers.
Thank you, definitely. It's a very key date that many will be taking some time off from work as well to celebrate shortly. Right, so let's turn our attention now to what's going on in the region with Iran. And Iranian military officials have recently suggested that the US and Israel could attempt to replicate Iran's Shahid drone design and stage attacks on neighboring countries in order to falsely attribute them to Tehran. How should we interpret this message? What does that mean for the region if something like that was to happen?
You know, there is a war, and in war everything kind of becomes possible. So it means that usually during normal time are not allowed to use. During war they become possible. So I think this is not out of reality. It could be possible. And when there was attack on Nashirvan, Iranian media news insisted that it was not Iranian drones, even so it was clear that it came from Iranian territory. So difficult to say. War is complicated and dangerous thing, and I think it is possible. But mainly I think this serves to propaganda, in my opinion, because Iran has regional ambitions, And actually, it happens with any revolution. So after Islamic Revolution, Iran put itself at the core of defending, let's say, Islamic world, even so we know that in case of Azerbaijan, it was not the case. During all 35 years of aggression and occupation, they supported Armenia, not Azerbaijan. Even so, Azerbaijan is the closest country to Iran by religion, by culture, by history. So Iran has regional ambitions, and it's clear. And even today in Iran, very often they consider not only Azerbaijan, but entire South Caucasus as part of previous countries that existed in this geography, like Qajar state, Safavi state, all others. So it's clear that they will have ambitions that many depends on how this war will end.
Yes, definitely, which is something that everybody wants to see, but no one knows how we're going to get there.
True.
Because of what's going on. But Azerbaijan's, another point, I wanted to point out in the discussions in regards to the Hague Island and what happened over the weekend with the US attacking that particular principal oil export for Iran. If this infrastructure were continued to be a focal point of strategic pressure, how likely is it that Iran could respond with broader retaliatory measures targeting not only US assets, but maybe expanding into the wider region?
This is a good question, Nadia, but the question is how much resources or arsenal Iran still has, because the United States damaged the critical military capabilities, so we don't know yet, exactly. Only if this happens, if the United States attacks Hague Island, and especially oil facilities on it, in this case we will see what will be Iran's retaliatory actions. Right now it's difficult to say, but I guess that Iran still has some capacity. It's my guess. Iran still has some capacity, so they definitely will, first of all, I think they will attack Gulf states. And also, I think they will kind of, right now they keep almost, kind of open for ships that belongs to countries which they don't consider, as enemies. So. But in this case, I think a situation with a kind of delivery of oil to the world market will be even worse than today. Plus, in the long run, let's say war is over, but if Iran's facilities on Hague Island are destroyed, in this case, Iran also will need some time to restore its capacity, independent, whether this region will survive or it will be replaced by some other, let's say, it's in theory,
yes,
more friendly to the United States region. So I think it's a difficult question, not easy to answer.
Yeah, no, and it comes with so many different factors,
yes,
doesn't
absolutely.
it? Like if this was to happen or if that was to happen,
Yes, exactly.
or how to rebuild the country back up. Azerbaijan has recently been diplomatic and humanitarian responses and gestures to Iran. It sent humanitarian aid to Iran last week. Do you think gestures like this reduce the likelihood that Iran will target countries in the South Caucasus, including Azerbaijan?
In the South Caucasus, I think the main kind of objective is more propaganda than actions. What I mean under that? The fact is that there are two countries which could be considered and in reality are successors of Qajar state. One is Islamic Republic of Iran, but the second one is Republic of Azerbaijan. And it's always kind of, because we were part of the Soviet Union, this truth was always concealed. And Azerbaijan was not able to claim because we were part of former Soviet Union. But nowadays, as Azerbaijan becomes more independent, so it becomes clear that not only Islamic Republic of Iran, but Azerbaijan is also successor state of Qajar state. And that's why Iran always was cautious about development of Azerbaijan as a country and development of Azerbaijanis as a nation, because Iran has a very big Azerbaijani population. So that's why during 35 years of occupation, the Iranian propaganda, being afraid of ethnic census of South Azerbaijanis, they were always portraying us, Northern Azerbaijanis, Republic of Azerbaijan, as people who get away from the religion, that we started, drinking alcohol in all sins. And that's why, despite being at least twice big as Armenia, we lost the First Karabakh War. It was propaganda. And it was aimed mainly for Azerbaijanis in South Azerbaijan to keep them under control. But it failed because Azerbaijan restored its sovereignty, our territorial integrity, and it impacted very much Azerbaijanis in South Azerbaijan. And that's why right now Iran's main agenda is to, again, to blame Azerbaijan, to keep southern Azerbaijanis under control. And part of this campaign was making Pezeshkian, ethnic Azerbaijani, president of Iran. It was orchestrated, no doubt about that, because Pezeshkian offered his candidacy in previous elections. But there is, council of experts, which always considers candidates which are allowed to participate in the elections. Previous times, Pezeshkian was not allowed. But this time, he was not only allowed to participate in the elections, he was also able openly to state his ethnic origin. He was speaking in Azerbaijani, and it was done intentionally. And second element, which always kind of, not always present, but Traktor, there is a fun sport club, soccer club, football club in Tabriz. Plays very well, I don't have no doubt about that. Previously, not allowed to become champion of Iran. And only last year it became champion of Iran. Because it's always orchestrated, because it was important for Iran to have Azerbaijanis, I mean for the government of Iran, for so-called deep state, to keep Azerbaijanis with the state. Why? Because Iran as a country and Qajar state, before that Safavi state, they were created under symbiosis, under civic agreement between two ethnicities, Persians and Turks Azerbaijanis. They created this state which existed for more than 1,000 years. And even so, the last Shah of Iran, Muhammad Reza, conducted, in Persepolis, this big parade about 2,500 years. Reality is that current Iran is product of this civic agreement between Persians and Azerbaijanis. But in 1925, Iran changed this policy. With British support, they replaced Qajar dynasty with new dynasty, and they started period of persifying Iran, denying Azerbaijanis their ethnicity, their origin, their language, their culture. And for 100 years they tried to conduct this policy, but they saw that it's failed. It was not impossible to eradicate, to eliminate, 35 million people. That's why I think Iranian leadership, deep state, is very rational. It's a big mistake considering them as a mullahs, they don't know, like, radicals. No, they are very rational. And they envisaged this war. And that's why to recreate again this civic agreement between Persians and Azerbaijanis, they allowed Pezeshkian to become president of Iran and, kind of allowed Azerbaijanis to feel that it's their own state again.
Right,
yes.
Okay.
And it was very important. That's why all aims now of Iran, including Mullah, heard about, there is professor of Tehran University, Professor Marandi, which acts as a spokesperson for Iranian government. He again attacked Azerbaijan, presenting as if we are supporting Iran, Israel and United States in war against Iran. So, in contrary, all aim of Azerbaijan is again to demonstrate to Iran, and especially to Azerbaijanis within Iran, that we are not enemy of Islamic Republic, that we are neutral, and we provide humanitarian aid to the extent of our abilities. But this is, this is propaganda war.
Right, I see. No, that's so interesting, and I'm sure we'll have to get some an Iranian, commentator to also clarify what they think in regards to the humanitarian aid that they've received from Azerbaijan and the wider conflict. But just moving quickly on to with energy pricing, because as a result of closing the Strait of Hormuz, energy prices have soared across the world. To what extent could Azerbaijan then play a role in stabilizing markets by increasing its own energy exports?
Azerbaijan is very small, actually, exporter of oil, less than 1% in the world. That's why I don't think that Azerbaijan can contribute a lot to the world prices. Azerbaijan can provide, and it provides already, help to 16 countries, including many countries in Southern Europe, to Italy, to Balkan states. I think it will continue playing important role in supplying these countries. But I think globally, Azerbaijan will not kind of play important role in affecting oil price. Azerbaijan will benefit from it because Azerbaijan will sell its own oil also by higher prices.
Yes.
But I think it will not impact price globally.
Yeah, because of the small amount that
Yes,
it exports.
exactly.
So in relation to that, and I guess moving to a different subject, if Russia were to become more actively involved in supporting Tehran, so we know that Russia and Iran are friends in all of this, but they've stayed on the sidelines in relation to this conflict. But if they were going to, play more of an active role in this conflict, how much more complicated could that situation become in the South Caucasus if Russia was to step in?
Of course, as I've said, Iran has regional ambitions, so has Russian Federation. So that's why countries like Azerbaijan in difficult situation. On the one hand, we don't want war in our neighborhood. This is clear. But at the same time, emboldened Iran if it kind of wins this war. And winning this war for Iran means not losing it, unlike of the United States. And I think I'm making now step aside, Nadia, because it's important. I observed Iran from the end of 90s, very clearly. I studied, theoretically very important books, and I'm following the events. I think it was very big mistake by the United States trying to change regime in Iran by military force. This is a mistake, and United States has experience, positive experience. For example, Soviet Union could not be destroyed militarily. And American strategists understood this during Cold War. They understood that regimes like that, they can collapse only from the inside.
Yes.
So I observed it. At the end of 90s, Iran was very close to kind of events, internal events, which could bring a positive outcome. But each time United States intervenes, they delay the process of positive changes within Iran because they emboldened, these radicals, they emboldened IRGC, they emboldened, these radical clerics, and state has, it gives impetus to the continuation of the current regime. Regimes like that cannot destroy it from the outside. The only possibility is to leave them alone, to kind of create some zone of protection. For example, why they needed this intervention. There were protests in Iran, and we observed it at the end of December, beginning of January.
Yes.
Let them continue. Why? Because what's regime? Regime means that, there is certain group within the country, like in the former Soviet Union. Soviet Union, all shelves in the stores were empty. We didn't have appropriate food, appropriate, clothes, nothing. But certain elite benefited from that.
Oh, gosh.
And the same in Iran.
Wow.
The
So
same
the
in
same
Iran.
thing was
The
same
same
thing
was
happening.
the same was in Iran. So that's why when you allow internal processes develop, in this case, because majority suffers from that.
Yes, and
the
that's why
majority-
things collapse
yes,
inside.
Yes, yeah, inside.
Mr. Mammadov, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to cut it there. You've given us so much to think about. And to
Invite
go
me for
on.
longer discussions, and
Yes.
because I think there are many stereotypes which don't allow to understand what's happening within Iran. And without appropriate analysis,
Yes.
it's difficult to build a policy.
Yes,
That's the
definitely.
problem.
And it's so interesting how you
Yeah.
say when someone intervenes into that, when the US decides to use military force, it works against them.
They
instead of
rally
for them.
around the flag.
Yes.
Even those that are against the regime,
Yes.
they are not against the country. And I think it's the biggest mistake the United States
Has made.
Now this war is considered as war against Iran,
Yes.
not as a war against
The regime.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Mammadov, for joining me this morning. That's
My
been
pleasure.
fantastic.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now to Georgia, and its government is pushing back against the latest resolution from the European Parliament. Officials in Tbilisi say the document is detached from reality and questions Brussels' authority to judge the country's internal politics. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili brings us more from Tbilisi.
The strongest reaction to the latest resolution of the European Parliament came from Georgia's foreign minister. Maka Bacharishvili dismissed the document, saying European Parliament resolutions on Georgia have long been detached from reality. Her argument went farther than just disagreement with the text itself. She suggested that lawmakers in Brussels have no responsibility for the country's internal political decisions, and therefore their assessments cannot be treated as authoritative. The resolution adopted on March 12 by 438 votes to 37 calls for the immediate release of opposition politician Elena Khoshdari and others detained for what European lawmakers describe as politically motivated reasons. It also raises concerns about former President Mikhail Saakashvili's continued imprisonment and deteriorating health, and calls for investigations into allegations of ill treatment of detainees and reports about the use of chemical agents against protesters. Beyond individual cases, the document criticizes laws adopted by the government, including the transparency of foreign influence law and the law on family values and protection of minors, arguing that they restrict political activism, civil protest, and freedom of expression. Government officials responded not only to the criticism itself, but also to the legitimacy of the institution making it. Parliamentary Speaker Shavlo Papashvili compared the debate in the European Parliament to the Soviet Congress of People's Deputies, saying the tone of the discussion resembled political attacks against Georgia during the late Soviet period. These reactions illustrate how relations between Tbilisi and European institutions have shifted from policy disagreements to a deeper political confrontation. Since 2024, disputes over democratic reforms, legislation, and Georgia's EU integration path have repeatedly escalated. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
It's time to take a quick break, but when I return, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Make sure you don't go anywhere. Good morning, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm your host Nadia Jani, taking you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. Trump vents frustration with allies over Strait of Hormuz. Afghanistan accuses Pakistan of killing hundreds in a hospital strike. And Trump says he is honored to take Cuba, who has been hit by island-wide blackout as energy crisis deepens. Now let's take a look at the front of the story shaping the day of the globe, and we head first to what's going on in Cuba and France 24. So their headline is Cuba hit by massive island-wide blackout as power grid crisis deepens. Now what is actually going on? So US President Donald Trump said, "Taking Cuba, I mean whether I free it, take it, I think I can do anything I want with it," is what he said yesterday at the Oval Office. He also added that they're a very weakened nation right now. Now, his words come on the same day, as you can see from this picture, that a lot of darkness is there, same day that Cuba experienced nationwide blackout on Monday. Now, Monday evening, and Cuban officials had also planned to announce that the country's communist government would open itself to foreign investment. However, it's unclear how widely Cuba intends to open its economy up. Some experts say that the island could run out of fuel within weeks. Now, why is this happening? So for the past 3 months, the US has choked off Cuba's access to foreign oil, blocking shipments from Venezuela and a number of other Latin American countries. Hospitals have had to postpone some procedures, and there's been food shortages, which has led to protests on the island. Now, the New York Times held a piece and actually reported that the Trump administration is said to be seeking a push to push out President Miguel Diaz-Canel from power, hoping that they'll also get a change in leadership. Trump did comment on that and said that he doesn't necessarily want to change the regime, but definitely wants to change the president. But he's also in two minds about whether or not he will do both or just one. But it's something that he's been looking to do, which is why he's made sure that he's put pressure on Cuba and sanctioned them and made sure that no oil is getting to them, which is having a major impact on the country, as we can see from some of these pictures. Now we head over to our next headline, and it's in relation to what's going on in the Middle East with Iran and also with flights. Now, Flight Radar, which will be on your screens very shortly, shows what the air traffic situation is currently. And as you can see there, there's still a major hole, a major round of where a number of flights are making sure that they're not going through. In relation to that, also what's also happening is that the United Arab Emirates have said that they've returned to opening normal. They had a temporary closure on Tuesday, but now they've reopened, and that closure was due to a number of things, but mainly because of the Iran attack their airspace, so they had to shut it for safety reasons. And if you can see in that map that there is a major hole going around all of Iran, but a number of flights still heading to Dubai, the UAE, and a number of other countries around. But that conflict is proving to have a major impact on flights and delays happening in and around that area. So if you are deciding to head out, make sure you do check, because it's something that flights are currently getting more and more aware of in relation to that. Now, the next headline is on CNN, and that's in regards to what is also taking place in Iran. It's day 17 of Middle East conflict. Trump criticizes nations not committing to assist with Hormuz Strait crisis. Yesterday, Trump said that he wanted a number of NATO allied countries to step in to help with the security of ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. However, a number of EU countries have stepped out and said that no, they don't want to do it. The UK has been vocal in saying that they do not want to get involved in a war that they feel that is not directly involving them as well. A number of EU countries said that it's not their problem, it's America's problem to solve as well. There's been comments as well from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He said NATO is a defensive alliance, not an interventionist one, and that is precisely why NATO has no place at all being there. And Luxembourg's Deputy Prime Minister Xavier Bettel said, don't ask us to send troops in regards to Trump's request. So it's something that a number of EU countries have been requested about. Trump has come back and said he's not happy in regards to a number of those countries that are not enthusiastic to provide help that he wants, but has said that France is willing to provide a helping hand, but hasn't said exactly how that will look. But for more information, we now go to a report with more detail in relation to this top story.
As the conflict in the Middle East enters its 17th day, US President Donald Trump has signalled frustration over the reluctance of allies to support US military efforts, particularly in securing the Strait of Hormuz. Trump earlier called on nations to help safeguard the strait after Iran responded to US-Israeli attacks by using drones, missiles and mines, effectively closing the channel to tankers that normally transport a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer refrained from sending warships to the strait, with authorities saying they were considering only the option of deploying drones to search for mines.
Prime Minister of UK, United Kingdom, yesterday told me, I'm meeting with my team to make a determination. I said, you don't need to meet it with the team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make your own. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us or to send some boats?
Meanwhile, strikes across the Middle East have continued, with Iraqi security officials reporting drones and rockets attacking the US embassy in Baghdad in what they describe as the most intense assault since the attacks began. Baghdad's Al Rashid Hotel was also struck on Monday, causing damage but no casualties, though no group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Across Israel, interception explosions were seen in the night sky over Tel Aviv. It comes as the Israeli military says it is advancing operations against Iran, with reports of strikes on Iran's Navy headquarters.
Our pilots attack across Iran all of the time. In the 24 hours, we hit the Revolutionary Guards Navy headquarters. The Iranian regime used this headquarters to turn the naval arena into a terror arena. In another attack in the heart of Tehran, we hit and destroyed a satellites attack capabilities development center, a center that posed a threat to Israel's and the whole world's space assets and satellites. At the same time, we continue to attack the Basij forces, the Iranian oppression forces.
As the conflict in the Middle East continues, prospects for de-escalation appear limited, with neither the US and Israeli side nor the Iranian side signalling a push towards a ceasefire agreement.
US President Donald Trump says American strikes carried out with Israeli support have hit more than 7,000 commercial and military targets across Iran. Trump claimed the campaign has reduced Iranian ballistic missile launches. Here's more.
At this table, our powerful military campaign to end the threats posed by the Iranian regime continued in full force over the past few days. They have been literally obliterated. The Air Force is gone. The Navy is gone. Many ships have been sunk. They're warfighting ships, but I guess they didn't know how to use them. And anti-aircraft is decimated. Their radar is gone, and their leaders are gone. Other than that, they're doing quite well. They've been a terror for 47 years. And now, I guess, the world, through the United States, with the help of Israel, is doing what should have been done many years ago. Should have been done many years ago. Since the beginning of the conflict, we've struck more than 7,000 targets across Iran, and these have been mostly commercial and military targets. We've achieved a 90% reduction in their ballistic missile launches and a 95% reduction in drone attacks. The missiles are trickling in now at very low levels because they don't have too many missiles left.
Now, Israel's military says its troops have begun limited and targeted ground operations against the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Several Western countries have warned that a wider offensive could worsen the humanitarian crisis and prolong the conflict. Here's more.
Canada, France, Germany, Italy and Britain have warned that a major Israeli ground offensive in Lebanon must be averted, saying it could have devastating humanitarian consequences and risk a protracted conflict. The statement also expressed support for Lebanese efforts to disarm Hezbollah and called for urgent engagement between Israeli and Lebanese representatives to negotiate a sustainable political solution. The move came after the Israeli military said on Monday that its troops had begun limited ground operations against Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon in recent days, aimed at strengthening forward defences. Meanwhile, smoke rose over southern Beirut on Tuesday as Israeli strikes hit multiple areas, with flashes of explosions lighting up the night sky. A statement from the Israeli military said the troops had located and dismantled a Hezbollah weapons cache. The area was reportedly evacuated and weapons and materials used for incitement were seized. Tensions have also spilled across the border. Emergency services in northern Israel reported 3 people injured when a projectile fired from Lebanon struck a building, sparking a fire. Lebanon was drawn deeper into the Middle East conflict on March 2nd after the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel, claiming retaliation for the killing of Iran's supreme leader at the start of the US-Israel war with Iran. Lebanese authorities report more than 880 people have been killed, over 1 million displaced, and more than 130,000 now living in collective shelters. Israel has maintained positions in southern Lebanon since a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November 2024. But the latest escalation has raised fears the conflict could spiral into a wider regional war.
Turning to the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, and Russia said its forces had captured 12 settlements in Ukraine during the first 2 weeks of March. Meanwhile, Kyiv's air defences intercepted a daytime drone attack with explosions reported across the capital, but with no immediate casualties.
Russia launched a daytime drone attack on Kyiv on Monday, Ukrainian officials said, with explosions heard across the capital as air defences worked to intercept the drones. Its forces also captured 12 settlements in Ukraine during the first 2 weeks of March, according to the country's top military officer.
The Forces Group North continues to establish a security zone in the border areas of the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. In March, 5 settlements were taken under control: Bobilivka, Rogozna, Chervona Zaria and Mala Babilivka in the Sumy region and Kruglaya in the Kharkiv region.
Ukraine's Air Force said it shot down 194 out of 211 drones launched in the attack. Officials said about 30 drones targeted the Kyiv region, and some appeared to use upgraded communication systems that allow them to be guided during flight. Drone debris fell in several districts of the capital, including the city's main square. Authorities said no casualties were immediately reported, though residents rushed to shelters as explosions were heard. Russian officials said around 250 Ukrainian drones were intercepted near Moscow over the weekend in what they described as the largest attempted strike on the Russian capital in at least a year. The escalation comes as both sides continue to exchange drone attacks.
Now, tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan continue to rise after an airstrike hit a rehabilitation hospital in the Afghan capital of Kabul, killing around 400 people. The Taliban government has accused Pakistan of carrying out the attack, a claim Islamabad strongly denies. Here's more on that story.
Dozens of people are feared dead or injured after an airstrike hit a drug treatment centre in Kabul, Afghanistan on Tuesday. Officials from the Taliban government say the attack was carried out by Pakistan. The strike reportedly targeted the Omid Addiction Treatment Hospital, a 2,000-bed facility that provides treatment for people struggling with drug addiction. Pakistan has rejected the accusation, describing it as false and misleading. Officials say their forces carried out precision strikes on Monday night, targeting what they called military installations and terrorist support infrastructure. They insist that the operations were directed only at military sites in Kabul and in the eastern Afghan province of Nangarhar. However, Afghan health officials say there are no military facilities located near the hospital. Rescue teams were deployed to the scene to control fires and search through the damaged buildings for victims. The strike came hours after officials reported exchanges of fire along the shared border between the two countries. 4 people were also reported killed in separate cross-border clashes, as the deadliest fighting between Afghanistan and Pakistan in years enters its 3rd week. Tensions between the neighbouring countries reignited last month after Pakistan accused Afghanistan of harbouring militant groups, an allegation the Taliban government denies.
Now to the US, and US President Donald Trump on Monday announced the creation of an anti-fraud task force aimed at curbing what he described as widespread fraud across the US. The executive order will require federal agencies, including the Treasury and Justice Departments, to share information and work together to tackle scams. Trump appointed Vice President J.D. Vance as chair, saying he would root out what the administration describes as hundreds of billions of dollars in fraudulent payments flowing through federal healthcare and social service programs.
Seriously, because nobody had until he was president. We started to figure out one big hole.
Staying on the US, President Donald Trump has made remarks about Cuba during comments at the White House, saying he believes he could have the honor of taking the island nation, which he described as currently weakened. Here's more on that story.
So it could be that we delay it a little bit. I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders.
Staying on Cuba, the island has been hit by nationwide blackout on Monday, impacting 11 million people as its energy and economic crisis deepen and its power grid continues to crumble. Here's more.
Cuba's national electricity grid has collapsed, leaving around 10 million people without power across the island as authorities work to restore electricity. The country's grid operator, Union Electrica, said it is investigating the cause of the outage. Officials ruled out a major power plant failure, but indicated the blackout may have been triggered by a problem in the transmission system. Engineers have begun restoring electricity to small clusters of circuits, known as microsystems, an early step toward reconnecting the national grid. The blackout is the latest in a series of outages affecting the country, where residents have become accustomed to frequent power cuts lasting hours or even days.
The news didn't surprise me. We're already used to living with this. I think we need to become less dependent on what happens at the national level and focus more on our own individual problems. If the national electric power system goes down, people have to find ways to prepare themselves however they can, with wood-burning stoves, with solar panels for those who can get them, with water reserves for those who face shortages, and with gas reserves for those who have access to them, which is actually an even more complicated issue than the power grid.
Cuba's electricity system has struggled in recent years because of aging infrastructure and fuel shortages, which have repeatedly caused major disruptions. The crisis has also intensified political tensions. The United States has increased pressure on Havana this year, including measures aimed at limiting oil shipments to the island, further straining its already fragile energy system.
Now, Trump has repeated his call for other nations, particularly NATO allies, to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, and says he has been surprised more world leaders were not eager to be involved in the key oil shipping route. Now, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says this war is not a matter for NATO, and Trump has also called on China to help because he has said that they get 90% of its oil from the strait as well. Now, joining me to discuss and further unpack this is China's position is Qinzhou Zhu, a senior fellow at the Pangoal Institute in Beijing. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
My first question, given what I just read out, is the strategic location of the Strait of Hormuz and its connection to the wider Indian Ocean. Where does this place China and its response to the US's demands?
Well, this Strait of Hormuz obviously is critically important to China, just like it is to many Asian nations, to India, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, for example. We heavily depend on the energy supply out of this strait, from Middle East countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, including Iran here. So nobody expects conflicts or welcome any kind of war in this because we need stability. Stability for those oil-producing countries to export what they can produce, and also for countries who, oil to import from this part of the world. But if you look at what happened, of course, it's Trump launched this attack on Iran without consulting let's say Asian countries, China or NATO countries. So now we had a mess here, and the US somehow is unable to fix this problem. So they asked the European allies in NATO, asked China to provide help. But for China, if we want to fix this problem, first of all, we need to have a ceasefire, stop fighting, both for Iran and the United States, which is unfortunately.
Definitely, and I think Trump has said, that China, as you mentioned, 90% of its oil comes from the Strait of Hormuz. And do you think, therefore, what Trump is asking allies and China is a reasonable request in order to safeguard the oil route?
No. First of all, the number is wrong. It's not 90%. For China, China does rely to a certain percentage from supply from this region. It's about 30 to 40% from this region. Secondly, China's purchasing of oil from Iran continues despite all the bombing. The Chinese ship basically navigate through this strait without much trouble. The third point is China has reduced its reliance on fossil fuel to a great extent. China is in the leading position in terms of renewable energy, solar panels, wind energy, and EV development. And also, lastly, I would say, in the worst situation, China has abundance of coal. And it can rely upon in terms of a fossil fuel. So for Asian countries, China is the least, obviously, least affected in terms of supply of energy from this part. Still, I would say China does have an obligation in the sense, as a member of the UN Security Council, to do something, at least to urge the United States to stop its, many people call it illegal war on a sovereign nation. And secondly, China would ask Iran, not to attack countries in the region like Saudi Arabia, like UAE or Qatar, at least not beyond the U.S. military-based countries. So no, I would say the U.S. The proverb, you break it, you own it. The U.S. break, the peace and stability in this region. I think the U.S. should hold the largest part of obligation to fix this problem, and they should talk to the Iranians and probably to ask what they can do to stop the war, to have a ceasefire, to have a long-term peace and stability in this region between the U.S. and Israel and Iran. We know that deeply rooted problem and distrust or even hatred among the nations. They have to find a way to solve that. Bombing is not the solution.
Yes, well, it's so interesting that the points that you make in regard to that obviously China actually is in a much stronger position than a number of countries just because of its fossil fuel coal availability and a number of different factors that you highlighted there. Would you say that China is a friend to Iran? Do you think that it could act as a mediator between the two countries, between the US and Iran, in order to provide some form of ceasefire or some kind of closure to this?
Well, I think there's no problem for China to play a role. We know that China used to play a role, a very prominent role, for example, in the finalization of the previous Iranian nuclear agreement, a deal we call it JCPOA, basically under the US President Obama period. So the major powers, the big five of the UN Security Council, China, US, the UK, France, together with, of course, the Germany 6+1 formula, that is seen as the best deal we can have. On one hand, for the international community to monitor, to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. On the other hand, they do give Iran some incentive to develop normal trade, to lift some sanction gradually. So that's a win-win agreement. But that agreement was thrown away by Donald Trump during his first term. And now, there's only one solution, seems, that is war. But we know that war is not the solution. The U.S. is in big trouble, struggling a bit. There are reports, for example, like Iranian approach, to the United States to talk, or the U.S. wants to talk to Iran, but it's not confirmed. We're not sure whether that's true or not. I think the problem, for any country to act as a mediator, the problem is like the U.S. The credibility. They don't have the credibility, unfortunately. They basically changed twice. They deceived them, while the Iranians were to join a formal negotiation, and then all of a sudden they were under the U.S. attack. And the Iranians basically saying that no, we are not in the mood of having another negotiation with the United States until we really some serious injury on the U.S., so they will not attack us again.
Yeah, so it's definitely
so
them.
I think things will continue for a while until we
Yes, no, thank you for that, Mr. Zhu. And very, very quickly before you go, the US president has asked if he could delay his visit to Beijing following the conflict that he's having with Iran. Is that something Xi Jinping will welcome, or do you think that will put a delay in what needs to be discussed between the two powers?
It seems the delay is very likely, given Trump says he's at war, so he's not really, in the mood or have the time to deal with the relationship between Beijing. For China, China welcomes relationship with the U.S. and talk to their leader, because it is important not only to two countries but also to the entire world.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning, Mr. Zhu. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're watching Daybreak on A News. We're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'll give you another couple of stories that we will be looking at, one to do with space, another to do with the world in Europe. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now let's turn to Europe. And at a Brussels meeting, EU foreign ministers said they will not get drawn into the escalating conflict with Iran. They stressed protecting global energy supplies while avoiding a wider NATO confrontation. Our correspondent, Inisa Sharma, has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, as the Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels says it will not be drawn into the escalating war with Iran. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said ministers discussed the growing security risks posed by the closure of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, which carries a significant share of the world's oil shipments. They talked about reinforcing the EU's naval mission Operation Aspides, which protects commercial shipping across a wide area from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Oman. But Kallas revealed that member states did not want to expand the mission's mandate into the Strait of Hormuz, despite mounting pressure from Washington. Aspides was launched back in 2024 following attacks on merchant ships by Yemen's Houthi militants, and currently focuses on safeguarding freedom of navigation and monitoring maritime threats in that region. Kallas also warned that the crisis could benefit Russia, noting that disruptions to global energy supplies and rising oil prices risk boosting Moscow's revenues and helping finance its war against Ukraine. The debate comes as U.S. President Donald Trump continues to express frustration with his allies. Last night, he said the problem with NATO is that the U.S. will, quote, always be there for them, but they'll never be there for us. Germany pointed out that the conflict with Iran is not a NATO matter and ruled out participation in a broader military campaign. Meantime, Kallas met with India's foreign minister in Brussels and stressed that the EU is growing closer to India as, quote, geopolitical uncertainty makes a clear case for deeper partnerships. Alongside the Middle East crisis, ministers reviewed developments in Moldova, where the EU is monitoring security concerns around the country's water supply linked to Russian strikes on Ukrainian hydropower. Overall, though, Brussels wants to make it very clear that while Europe shares the goal of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and protecting global energy supplies, the EU remains very wary of turning the Iran conflict into a wider NATO confrontation. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Let's turn to the galaxy, and China says its latest space station mission is continuing to advance scientific research and station operations. Astronauts aboard the Tiangong orbital station have now completed another spacewalk, marking a new step in the ongoing Shenzhou 21 mission. Let's take a look.
3 Chinese astronauts aboard the country's Tiangong space station have completed another spacewalk during the Shenzhou 21 mission. Crew members Zhang Lu, Wu Fei and Zhang Hongzhang spent about 7 hours working outside the station, assisted by the station's robotic arm and ground controllers. Their tasks included installing a protective device against space debris and carrying out external maintenance before safely re-entering the Wentian laboratory module. With the latest operation, Zhang Lu has now conducted 6 extravehicular activities, placing him among China's most experienced spacewalkers. The Shenzhou 21 spacecraft launched on October 31st, 2025, sending the trio to the Tiangong station for a 6-month mission. During their time in orbit, the astronauts have been responsible for station maintenance, environmental monitoring, and a range of scientific investigations covering life sciences, microgravity physics, and emerging space technologies. Experiments also include research into mammalian reproduction in microgravity using mice, part of China's expanding long-term research program aboard the station. After more than 4 months in orbit, the crew is expected to carry out further spacewalks and continue scientific testing in the coming weeks.
Thank you so much for watching Daybreak with me this morning. We're going to take a break for a couple of weeks because of Nowruz, but I just want to give everyone and say a massive Shah Shambra Mivbarek. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but enjoy the holidays. We will be here providing you with latest updates, so make sure you stay tuned to A News, and thank you for joining me this morning.